About 20 minutes for Q&A, and will be a little biased, so students would have preference for questions. So you can, those who want to ask questions, just raise your hand and then you have to stand up and the volunteers will go with the mic to you. All right? Okay. All right, just stand up there so that we can.
Hello sir, thank you for the lecture. I'm Pratama Gupta. My question is basically in the current field where we see a lot of economic assumptions going a bit off the track. How do we make smart and rational decisions right now? Being rational, one of the most important factors here in making the decisions. Thank
you. Do you mean how do we as citizens make rational decisions, or how do you students?
So it's basically you divided econs versus humans, right? So we're talking about humans particularly here.
Well, look, we don't want to all become econs. Because econs, you know, they're kind of selfish. They don't care much about fairness. You know, if you've ever been to an economics cocktail party, it's kind of boring. So I'm not suggesting that we all should become economists. But we want to be a little bit more like economists if we're planning our retirement, or deciding to buy a home, or deciding what career to take. And then get out your Excel spreadsheet.
Good afternoon, sir. So I just had a question. My name is Rishabh Kumar, and I'm a student of economics, and I had a question for you, sir. That is, so what are the ethical challenges that a person faces when they are trying to construct nudges for the economy or for societies at large, sir?
Okay, that's a great question. On the public policy side, the nudgers, the choice architects, essentially have to do a kind of cost-benefit analysis. So, you know, we've probably the most successful activity in the public policy side has been designing retirement saving plans. And the biggest policy change has been to automatically enroll people. So make pensions opt out instead of opt in. That has a huge effect. Now, are we sure that we're helping people when we do that? Pretty sure. We know people aren't saving very much. We know that very few people who are automatically enrolled then later change their mind. So if we were getting them to do something bad for them, they might figure it out. Now, other cases aren't going to be as easy. And I think it'll be like any policy choice. We will need to rely on government for better or for worse. And for other choice architects, the administrators of IIM are your choice architects. They're designing the curriculum. That's choice architecture. You have to hope they're doing it, that they're nudging you for your best interest and not theirs. If they're requiring classes because they have too many faculty members who are only qualified to teach that class, it's like when you go to a restaurant and they recommend some dish that they have too much of. That's not good. So there is an evil kind of nudging on the private sector side, I refer to this as sludge. And you know, sludge literally is the gunk that is a byproduct of like oil drilling. And one example is automatically enrolling, automatic renewals, and all kinds of online come-ons, from Nigerian email scams to other kinds of activities. We didn't invent nudging. It existed. We gave it a name. And people have been nudging from the beginning. So I think understanding how this works helps you defend yourself. Like, I am very careful about trial subscriptions because I'm very careless about kings. Now, I have a proposed rule, which is that it should be as easy to get out of a subscription as it is to get in. Many subscriptions don't work that way. And if I were running a company, I would insist on running things that way, though it might cost us some money. If you're in the balcony and you have a question, I think you should come downstairs. Okay, we see you.
Good evening, sir. The question that I had for you was regards to the answer that you just gave, where you said that the choice architects, the government, we just have to rely on them, that they're doing their job properly. But in some cases, we see that even though policies are framed correctly, policy implementation fails because of, behaviorally humans being corrupt or misappropriation of funds. So in that kind of a situation, who should be the choice architect and what should be the mechanism to nudge the government to do away with corruption so that policies can be implemented more successfully?
Well, I think you guys have to be the people that nudge the government. That's politics. And we need the youth to nudge governments around the world, some of whom are not living up to our biggest hopes. I've taken a pledge, I'm here for a week, not to talk about local politics. I'm happy to say that we have the worst president in our history. And I invite you all to come over and volunteer during the campaign next year. And as far as Indian politics go, look, democracy is the worst of all political systems except for the alternatives. So you don't want the alternative. And if the government is doing things you disapprove of, let them know.
Good evening, sir. I have a different question, not related to your work.
I don't see you, so.
Yeah.
Okay, got it, thanks.
Okay. Sir, the question is that I think most of us will have a lot of ideas. And when you share it with others, people might not encourage you, might say that it's stupid. And two of the things can happen. It's actually stupid, or maybe it's too good, and people are not able to comprehend the depth or the utility of it. And with you, I think you must be like when you were going through the behavioral economics initial stages, people, the traditional economists were not very accepting of this fact. So what really drove you, and what is it that made you still stick to it and not be be rational and take the conventional way?
That's a great question. You know, I spent some time yesterday talking to my old friend Dipankar Dasgupta, who's both old and an old friend. I can say he's old because he's the same age as me. About what I was like in graduate school, because I'm too old to remember. And he told me that I was a troublemaker then. So I think that was part of my nature. But more to answer your question, I think I was stubborn and persistent, but in the end, I only convinced people with data. And it took all different kinds of data. So like I showed you that little Cuba joke. Notice that, you know, I have a very boring paper about closed-end mutual funds. It's not a very good joke, but you can publish it in the Journal of Finance. So one of the reasons I started writing papers in finance was that they were hard to dismiss because there's lots of money, and it was supposed to be the place that you would be least likely to find anomalies. So if you have an idea that other people think is stupid, there are two possibilities. It is stupid, or you haven't figured out how to convince them. Keep trying and figure out which it is.
Sir, I am Dr. Devashish Majumdar from Reserve Bank of India. Hello.
Okay, yeah, we see you.
I am Dr. Devashish Majumdar from Reserve Bank of India. Actually, I supervise the survey work in India, inflation expectation survey. But I found some biases, might be cognitive biases, because here rich and upper middle class people usually deny for the survey. And for this reason, our survey pertains mostly 90% to the middle and poor class. For this reason. And because of this, actually we are getting a bias which is very acute. Due to poor class or middle class people, mostly less literated. That is, their education level might be less than the upper middle class to rich people.
Okay. So, look, I think you're running up against a problem that is the same problem political polls are facing, which is that it's getting harder and harder to reach people. Nobody answers their phone anymore if they don't know who's calling. You know, people don't have landlines anymore. So it's hard to get a representative sample. But I would say there's a more basic question, which is, why do we think that ordinary people have any idea about inflation? I don't. I mean, I might have some kind of informed views because I read the Wall Street Journal or the Economist, but as a consumer, you know, it's way too hard of a problem. And there will be biases, but I think the biases are things like some prices are more salient than others. So for example, you call it gasoline or petrol here? Petrol. Petrol prices are very salient because you go and you fill it up and you see the bill. And whereas if you go to the grocery store, you go to the supermarket, you fill up a cart, there are some things that you just need and you're throwing into the cart and you're not paying attention if it's gone up 5% or down 5%. Probably, well, in fact, there's evidence that the people who are most knowledgeable about prices are the poor. Now, and kind of for obvious reasons. It's more important to them. So I think the poor would be the most knowledgeable about what prices are, but I don't see that they would have any sensible reason to have expectations. So let me answer a different question. I'm going to use a trick all of my students have always used. They don't know the answer to the question I've asked, they answer a different one. Here's a project I've been trying for 30 years to get somebody to do, which is to do a study where expectations or, say, sentiment, investor sentiment, is on the left-hand side. I think we know essentially nothing about that. There's all kinds of papers that have sentiment as an explanatory variable, but what explains sentiment? For example, we know sentiment about the economy, people get pessimistic when unemployment goes up. But when unemployment goes up from 4% to 6%, still 94% are employed. So what exactly, do they have friends who are unemployed? Are they reading about it in the newspaper? I don't think we know anything about this. And so I think it's a great question you're asking, but I think there are lots of aspects of it, and keep working.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir.
Got it.
Sir, I'm Aditya, a student of economics from Presidency University. Sir, for the past few months, I've been learning about global financial crisis, which is there or which is about to come as the IMF predicts. Sir, I would like to learn from you that what is the exact nature of such a global financial crisis? Is it cyclical? Is it structural? So what is the exact nature? And also, could you also spare a word or two about your idea about the Indian economy? Thank you so much, sir.
My idea about the what?
About the Indian economy.
Okay. All right, so I'm not going to answer the second one because there are 50 people in the room at least who would have better answers, including 3 at the front. I will say, well, no, that would be politics. No, I'll say it anyway. I will say that the current troubles, shall we call them, obviously are threatening to the economy. There's nothing surprising or controversial about that. As to the coming financial crisis, no one has told me. So, and here's what we know. We've had a series of financial crises or bubbles or what have you, a series of events that should happen, according to theory, maybe once a century. In 1987, there was a crash. Stock prices fell all around the world 20% in one day. Can't happen. Then the next decade, we have the internet bubble, followed by a 50% crash in tech prices. Then we had a real estate bubble. That was mostly a US phenomenon, but caused a global financial crisis because of sort of the spillover from the securitization of mortgages. There's a very good movie about that I can recommend. And then, I don't know what, we've had a decade of kind of steady growth. And the most mysterious thing to me, at least speaking about the US economy, is we've had no volatility. It's like the market has been asleep for a decade. It's not bad, it slowly goes up. But have they not noticed who our president is? We're living in the riskiest time in my lifetime. And it's not just in the US. Brexit was madness. And even governments that seem extremely moderate and sensible, like in France, there are protests, yellow vests, and I would, if we could import Macron to be president of the U.S., I would take him in a minute. And but the French people don't seem so happy with him. So I think the democracy is fragile right now. And so as an investor, I'm nervous, but I don't know what I should do about it. So, you hold a diversified portfolio and hope for the best. And, I try to keep a part of my portfolio in fine wine, which is a hedge against everything.
My name is Utsav Biswas. My question is, what nudge would you recommend for breaking prejudices?
I'm not an expert in that, but I think there's at least a little bit of evidence that if people get to know one another, the prejudices decrease. And I think most prejudices are from ignorance. So the more mixing we can do, the better. But otherwise, I don't have a silver bullet.
Good evening, sir. My name is Tolongo Dotto. I'm a second-year doctoral student in operations management. So my question was related to the nudge theory, and it was that can I be a choice architecture in such a way that I can design a nudge for self-improvement. Say, for example, I am a lazy person and I want to be better the next day. So how can I design a nudge which would help me be a better person the next day?
Yeah, okay. Well, okay, this will be one lazy person talking to another. You may not know that my so-called best friend, Danny Kahneman, has said that my best feature is that I'm lazy. Now, it's bad enough that he says I'm lazy, but that it's my best feature, that's the part I complain about. So, but he insists this is a compliment, that it means I only work on important things. I'm not so sure. Anyway, look, there are all kinds of things. I have this famous story about pushing a bowl of cashews away in order to not eat them. And I call these self-nudges or snudges. And, technology provides all kinds of tools. Alarm clocks are self-nudges. To-do lists are self-nudges. If you don't know that you should ignore sunk costs, then you can trick yourself to going to the gym by buying a membership. That doesn't work for me because I'm really good at ignoring sunk costs. So I think that there's nothing foolproof, but there are obvious things. If you spend too much time playing video games, then get rid of the video games. Go to the library and study, if they still have libraries. Yeah, we do. Okay, so I used to, when I was a student, I used to go and study in the girls' dorm. They provided an incentive to go, and but not that many distractions. So, okay, last question now.
Currently, Canada seems to have got many of the answers right. Was this predictable? Can it be replicated?
Canada.
In terms of policy.
Yeah. Oh, well, my wife is Canadian, so she would agree with you. Look, I think Canada's doing a lot of things right, so is New Zealand. Those are my two backup destinations in the case of a Trump re-election.
Thank you. We have last two little things to do. One, I would request our director, Professor Anju Seth, to felicitate Professor Thaler with two of our institute's memorabilia.